Ready for a climb. We're ditching the hiking gear today and taking a deep dive into something a little different. The 5 stages of consciousness in Buddhist thought.
Yeah, we're trading the mountain trails for the landscape of the mind this time.
Gotta love a good mental workout. And our guidebook for this trek is going to be the Treatise on the Distinction between Definitive and Provisional Meanings.
Now, I know that title might sound a little intimidating. Like, seriously, who came up with that?
Right. Sounds like a mouthful.
But trust me, this deep dive is all about making these really complex Buddhist ideas about consciousness clear and relevant.
Which is what we're all about, right? Who doesn't want a little more clarity and a little less suffering in their life?
Exactly. And this treatise, it actually claims to map out a path to ultimate liberation.
Okay, so ultimate liberation. Sign me up. But where do we even begin with something as big as, like, 5 stages of consciousness?
Well, every journey starts with that first step,
Yeah,
right?
got to start somewhere.
And for us, that first step is tapping into that universal human desire, that yearning for clarity and liberation. And that's actually where the treatise starts, too. It lays out these 5 distinct stages, each one taking us a step closer to full enlightenment.
So it's like we're at the base of this mountain,
Yeah.
right? And at the very peak, that's enlightenment, total liberation.
I like that analogy.
So what's that very first step look like?
Okay, so in Sanskrit, it's called tulungvi, which translates to the seeking stage. So think about it. You're at the beginning of this incredible journey. You're full of motivation, maybe a little uncertainty, too.
Definitely some nerves.
And that's totally natural. This stage is all about laying the groundwork.
So less about intense meditation and more about getting in the right headspace for what's to come.
Exactly. It's about cultivating positive qualities like being more generous, ethical conduct. Basically, just working on being a good human.
Love that.
And at the same time, you're beginning to explore the nature of reality, asking those big questions like, who am I really and what is actually true?
It's like we're planting seeds of wisdom and compassion. But here's the thing, and maybe this is kind of a paradox, but we're trying to understand the illusion of a separate self while we're, like, still totally buying into that illusion in our everyday lives.
That is the interesting tension of this first stage. It's like we're trying to understand the ocean, but we're still standing on the shore.
Yeah.
It's a gradual process of just opening up to new possibilities.
I like that. Okay, so we've set our intentions, we've planted some seeds, now we're ready to start the real climb. That brings us to stage 2, right? Jihan Vit, the preparatory stage.
Now the real work begins.
Oh boy, here we go.
This is where we start taking action to dismantle that illusion of a separate self. You see, the treatise talks about grappling with what it calls the 2 graspings, which is really just clinging to the ideas of me and mine.
Well, those are some deeply ingrained ideas, though.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. It's like that feeling of me and mine that we all experience, that possessiveness, that self-importance we carry around.
Yeah, we all have those.
Well, that's what we're starting to really examine here.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we tackle those graspings?
This stage is all about practice. The treatise outlines 4 key meditations, and each one builds on the last. Nuan, Nun, None, and Thena. They're like tools for chiseling away at those old thought patterns.
Sizzling, huh? You're making this sound like some serious mental heavy lifting.
Well, it can be challenging. This stage definitely requires dedication and a willingness to really look inward.
But it's worth it, right?
And here's the amazing part. The treatise suggests that during this stage, we might even start getting glimpses of what true freedom from suffering actually feels like.
Wait, hold on. Glimpses. You're telling me we're climbing this mountain and we might actually catch a sneak peek of the summit, like before we even get there.
Exactly. Think of it like you're hiking up and suddenly there's this clearing and you get this incredible panoramic view. It's just a taste, mind you, just a glimpse of what's to come. But it's usually enough to make you crave more, to keep pushing forward.
I can only imagine. Okay, that feeling of freedom, even just a glimpse of it, that's got to be pretty enticing. It makes you wonder, what happens when we actually fully step into that insight? Well, that brings us to stage 3. Welcome back. So we've prepped for this climb, we started chiseling away at those old ingrained thought patterns, and we even got a glimpse of the summit, that feeling of true freedom.
It's quite a journey, isn't it?
It really is. So where do we go from here?
Well, stage 3 is where things get really, really interesting. The treatise calls this stage Thong.V, which translates to the insight stage.
Okay, insight. Sounds promising.
Right. Remember those glimpses of freedom we talked about?
Yeah, like that clearing in the woods.
Exactly. This is where you step into that clearing and experience the full panorama. It's the point where, according to the treatise at least, you directly experience the true nature of reality.
So this is it. We've reached the summit. Enlightenment.
It's a huge breakthrough, for sure. But here's the thing about insight. It's not just an intellectual understanding. The treatise emphasizes both what it calls direct insight, 正见道, and inferential insight, 正见道, as being essential for full awakening.
Okay, so I'm going to need a little help unpacking those. Direct and inferential insight. What's the difference?
So it's like this. It's one thing to, think about the nature of reality, but it's a whole other thing to actually experience it firsthand, to feel it in every cell of your being. That's what makes this stage so powerful.
So you're saying it's not just about getting it mentally, but really embodying that realization.
Yes. And that's what they call direct insight. But we also need inferential insight, which is more about using our reasoning and logic to deepen our understanding.
Okay, so it's like we're using both our hearts and our minds to really grasp the nature of reality.
Exactly. And that's where the real transformation happens. You see, in the last two stages, we've been doing the work, cultivating positive qualities, challenging those ingrained perceptions we talked about.
Right, laying the groundwork.
And now in stage 3, we're starting to reap the benefits of all that effort.
It's like all that mental heavy lifting is finally paying off, and now we're able to see the world through this brand new lens.
It's a pretty incredible shift in perspective.
It really is. But if this is the big aha moment,
Yeah.
what comes next? We still have 2 more stages to go.
Right, because this brings us to stage 4, what the treatise refers to as tutap V, the cultivation stage.
Cultivation stage.
Absolutely.
So we're not quite at the peak yet.
Not quite. Think of it this way. You've had this incredible revelation, this major shift in how you see the world, right?
Yeah, like a whole new perspective.
But old habits, they die hard. So this stage is all about solidifying that realization, making sure it really sticks.
So we've tasted freedom, but now we have to figure out how to actually live it, integrate it into our everyday lives.
Exactly. Remember the 2 graspings we talked about, that clinging to me and mine?
Yeah, those are tough ones to shake.
This stage is about uprooting those deeply ingrained habits that keep us clinging to those illusions.
Easier said than done, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the treatise gets incredibly detailed here. It actually breaks down the stage into 10 substages.
10. Okay, I think I'm getting a little overwhelmed.
It sounds more intimidating than it is, I promise. Don't get too caught up in the numbers for now. The important thing is understanding the overall arc of this stage.
Okay, so what's the main takeaway here?
It's about recognizing all those subtle ways that we still hold ourselves back from truly experiencing that lasting freedom.
Okay, I think I'm with you. So how do we do that? How do we work through those subtle obstacles?
The treatise talks about overcoming what it calls the 2 obscurations, which are basically like these persistent weeds in the garden of our minds.
2 obscurations. You're really into these pairs today.
Right. So the first obscuration is all about our afflictive emotions, things like anger, greed, jealousy, those things that cloud our judgment and keep us from seeing clearly. And then there's the obscuration of cognitive limitations, which are those rigid ways of thinking that keep us trapped in old patterns.
So we're not just clearing out the big weeds, but also those tiny little roots that can still, like, strangle the plant's growth.
Exactly. And to do that, we have to cultivate even greater levels of awareness and compassion.
It sounds like we're really getting down into the nitty-gritty of what holds us back from experiencing true freedom.
That's what this stage is all about. But as challenging as it can be, it's also incredibly empowering. It tells us that we have the capacity to transform ourselves from the inside out.
Okay, I'm starting to see the beauty of this whole path. It's not just about reaching the peak, but the transformation we experience during the climb. And speaking of peaks, I think we've finally made it. We've arrived at the 5th and final stage. Welcome back. So we've made it to the final part of our deep dive into the 5 stages of consciousness. We've covered so much ground already.
We really have. From those first steps, that initial yearning for something more,
Right, like setting off on this big climb.
to all the internal work, the chiseling, and the glimpses of freedom along the way.
It's been quite a journey, but it feels like we've climbed this mountain, cleared out some serious mental underbrush,
Definitely.
and now, finally, we're about to experience the summit. We've reached the 5th stage.
That's right. Stage 5, Kilkinvi. In the treatise, this is described as the full flowering of enlightenment.
Okay, so we've reached the peak. No more weeds. The view's incredible. But what's it actually like to reach this stage, this full enlightenment? I gotta be honest, after all that talk of graspings and obscurations back in stage 4, enlightenment is starting to sound kind of vague.
I get it. It's a big word, right? But the treatise actually uses this really helpful analogy to describe this stage. They talk about a mirror.
A mirror.
Yeah, imagine a mirror that reflects reality perfectly, without any distortion, no clouds, no smudges, just a clear, true reflection.
Okay, I kind of see where you're going with this.
So that mirror, that's what the enlightened mind is like, according to the treatise. It's not that we stop experiencing thoughts or emotions, it's just that we experience them without getting, swept away by them.
Ah, okay. So it's more about experiencing everything with total clarity.
Exactly. Complete openness. And that's what allows for the perfect wisdom, boundless compassion, and total liberation from suffering that this stage is all about.
Wow. Okay, so it really is that feeling of total peace and wisdom and compassion we talked about. The Buddha, I mean, that's what he embodied, right?
Exactly. He embodied the full flowering of enlightenment that the treatise is pointing us towards. And it explains this realization through the three bodies of the Buddha: Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya.
The three bodies of the Buddha. Okay, see, now you're speaking my language. Back in part 2, I was really starting to feel lost with those. Can we break those down a little bit? What do those even mean?
Absolutely. So think of Dharmakaya as that ultimate truth of reality. It's beyond form, beyond concepts. It's kind of like everything and nothing all at once.
Yeah.
It's vast and deep.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
Think of it like the ocean, constantly changing, but always the ocean.
Okay, that's a good one. I like that. That's pretty profound, actually. What about the other two bodies, then?
So the Sambhogakaya, that's the enjoyment body. It's the aspect of enlightenment that experiences pure bliss and wisdom. It's like the part of us that recognizes the interconnectedness of everything.
So if Dharmakaya is the ocean, is Sambhogakaya like riding the waves?
I love that. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's that feeling of being totally present, immersed in the experience of life. No resistance, just pure joy. And then we have the Nirmanakaya, which is the emanation body.
Okay, that one always throws me off. Emanation body. I don't know, it sounds kind of mystical.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
But think of the Nirmanakaya as the physical manifestation of enlightenment. It's how that enlightened energy interacts with the world, teaching, guiding others.
So it's like a bridge between that pure, formless awareness of Dharmakaya and the world we live in.
Exactly. It's like the sunlight reflecting on the surface of the ocean.
Okay, I'm with you.
It allows the light of enlightenment to shine into the world. So you see, the Buddha wasn't just, this historical figure. He was a representation of all of these different facets of enlightenment, these different bodies working together.
That's amazing. It really puts things into perspective. But while reaching that stage of full enlightenment, it sounds incredible, don't get me wrong, but it also kind of feels like a really distant goal.
Yeah.
Something that only Buddhas and saints achieve. I hear you, it can feel that way. But here's the really important part. The wisdom and compassion that are cultivated through each of these 5 stages, they're available to everyone.
That's really encouraging.
Right. We don't have to become enlightened masters to benefit from these teachings.
So even if we're not aiming for full-on enlightenment, we can still benefit from understanding these stages and incorporating them into our lives.
Exactly. Every act of generosity, every time we question our own rigid thinking, every moment of compassion, those are all steps towards realizing our own potential for awakening. And that's what this deep dive has been all about, right? Exploring how these ancient Buddhist teachings can still be incredibly relevant to our modern lives.
This whole journey through the 5 stages, it's really been eye-opening. I mean, we started by talking about climbing a mountain, and I think that's actually a perfect metaphor for this path.
Right. It takes effort, dedication, and it's not always easy.
But the view from the top, the transformation that happens along the way, it's all worth it. We learned about the 2 graspings that can hold us back, the 2 obscurations that cloud our minds, and the practices that can help us break free. And we even explored what it looks like to be a fully enlightened being.
It's an incredible path, and it's a path that's open to all of us.
So if there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from today's deep dive, it's that unlocking a more peaceful, joyful, and meaningful life, it all starts with understanding our own minds.
It's a journey of self-discovery. And it's a journey worth taking.